Good morning, my friends. Today, it's a beautiful sunny day. Actually, just checked the weather online. It's supposed to be pretty cold. It's about 3 degrees. So it's a chilly day. It's a sign that winter is somewhat approaching a little bit. We're still heavy into fall, but it's sort of just a little knock on the door saying that it's coming probably within the next month or so, which some people are scared of, but I always like to embrace every season and prepare for it myself. Winter is generally one of those things where I find that it's very much a time of reflection and sort of coming to terms with life or whatever. So today it's Friday, as you all know. Today I'm doing a book review. This book I have here is Siddhartha. A lot of people know about this book, probably read it in high school. It's a very short book, only 120 or so pages. So anybody who hasn't read it yet should definitely read it because it's very short and it took me at least a couple days to get through it. And it's a very easy read. It's definitely not something that'll take a lot of effort to focus in on. And I have to say, I do really like this book. It's very simplistic. The narrative is very simple. It takes, the story is about this kid named Siddhartha, who is, I forget what the term is. He's a Brahmin, right? He's a Brahmin in the Brahmin society, living with his father and one of his best friends. And he realizes that the spiritual fulfillment within that community is not what he's looking for. So then he joins this other sect. I forget what they're called, but they're basically all about death and about deep meditation and fasting, and so to speak. It's very, very intense Buddhism, like something akin to Tibetan Buddhism maybe, or something like that. So anyway, he does that. He's still not satisfied with it. He gets through it. It's kind of boring. Then he realizes that he wants to sort of find more spiritual fulfillment in the material world and indulge in sort of sensory pleasures, which is generally part of the Buddhist journey, or so to speak. The Buddha, in some tales, always has this journey of where he involves himself in depth into a sensory sort of lifestyle, so to speak, usually indulging in sexual and food pleasures, so to speak, all that kind of stuff. So basically he goes through that, and then he realizes that towards the end of his life that it really wasn't worth it. He becomes a merchant, and he becomes sort of obsessed with money and becoming afraid of losing it, and he ends up developing very materialistic emotions based off of the real world around him and not anything to do with his spiritual path, which he used to have when he first entered into the city, so to speak. Then he comes across, I'll just leave it at that. I don't really want to spoil it, but there's not really much to spoil because the book is very simplistic. It's very there's nothing really that happens that's very dramatic. I mean, the ending is a little bit intense towards the end. Some actions happen to him where that's a little bit whoa, I don't know, real spiritual realizations and coming to terms with his life, etc., etc. But even that feels very just very relaxed and not very dramatic and intense. Something as dramatic and intense as something like that, when you're sort of realizing your life existence, to make that into a way that's very light and digestible is probably one of the most difficult things you can do. And that's why I give credit to Hermann Hesse for making this book. It's a very good sort of westernized view into the Buddhist sort of world, the Eastern philosophy, so to speak, which I feel like a lot of especially Americans and people generally in the West should try to encapsulate. And I feel like the people in the East are generally moving towards more to a Western culture, which I also think is very beneficial. There needs to be this sharing of cultures in order to sort of have a deeper understanding both of each other and ourselves. So Siddhartha is it's a very simple book. Some criticisms that I might have of it towards the end, it does get a little bit too specific, I think, in terms of his spiritual sort of understanding and how he sort of sees the universe and God or whatever. And it becomes too literal in the sense that it becomes, well, based off of my experience of understanding meditation and understanding the astral world, if you want to call it that, is that it's a very subjective experience that's only going to be understood by you. You can't sort of understand it through somebody else's lens. You have to sort of find it your own way. You can use other people's experiences and other people's wisdom to sort of help guide you there, but at the end of the day, it's your path that you have to follow. And that's basically one of the main themes of this book, is following your own path, which his friend Govinda doesn't end up doing. He ends up following this great spiritual leader, and he ends up never finding that spiritual attainment because he can't sort of find his own path. He has to follow somebody else's, which ends up leading him unfulfilled at the end of his life, whereas Siddhartha does end up fulfilled. But even still, as the reader, the fulfillment that he experiences is basically told to us, which I think is an unnecessary addition. I feel like if there was like a little bit more of a mystery to sort of how he experiences his enlightenment, it sort of will help us sort of want to achieve it rather than it being laid out to us literally in a couple pages. I feel like is sort of detracts from the meaning of that specific event. So other than that, though, it's a really good book. There's been a lot of criticisms towards it. Like people think that people who read this think they're super deep or whatever, and they think it's pretentious. People who read this book are pretentious, or who enjoy it think they're super deep. The reality is that this book isn't really deep. It's very simple. It's very easy to follow, and I think the simplicity of it sort of disappoints people who are expecting this grand spectacle and this big deep, profound thing, when really it's not that profound. It's very simple. It's very real in terms of our existence, which I think that is important. Most of what we try to understand as being super complex is actually very, very simple, and that sort of irritates people, I guess, because they expect something huge and amazing, which I feel like you're missing the point about your life experience. It's not supposed to be complicated. It's supposed to be very simple. It's supposed to be very, you're supposed to just flow with it easily. You're not supposed to be fighting with it all the time in this complex system, which I think this book really encapsulates. That this sense of overcomplicating things is definitely a materialistic way of how we understand the universe, which I think there goes to some degree of importance of the complexity in terms of understanding the physical world, just so we can survive in it, just so we can attain a sense of stability, or like a foundation, right? If we're talking about, like, let's say finance and understanding the financial world is a very complex thing, and you should learn about it just so you can live and exist in it. But in terms of spiritual fulfillment and happiness, all that's very, very simple. And I think that challenges a lot of people because they want something super complex to make themselves feel like they've uncovered something, but really it's usually right there in front of your face, which I think is what this book sort of opens up. But in terms of really understanding it, in terms of being connected with it, that's something that people have to do on their own. They're not going to find it in another person's beliefs or another person's religion. that's you know, a way to fall down into a hole of false promises, so to speak. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that, and I hope you have a wonderful day.